Today I'll be exploring PTSD using the Menendez brothers' case to ask, what if their story had been interpreted through a trauma-informed lens? The Menendez brothers were convicted of planning and executing the brutal shotgun slayings of their parents in 1989. They claimed self-defense. Their father had sexually abused both of them for years, and they believed their lives were in danger. Why this case? Stigmas concerning male victims of sexual abuse played a role in the case. Studies show men who report sexual violence face major challenges receiving support and are at high risk of secondary victimization. Painting male survivors as either aggressors or complicit with their abuse invalidates and re-traumatizes survivors and disregards the complexity of male victimhood. This presentation, by the way, is not intended to offer a clinical diagnosis. The case history is that Jose Enrique Menendez, a Cuban immigrant, and Mary Louise Kitty Anderson married in 1963 and moved to New York City. They had two sons. Lyle was born in 1968 and Eric was born in 1970. After Jose was appointed as the CEO of an entertainment company, they moved across the country to California. In 1988, Lyle, who was 19, and Eric, who was 16, committed multiple burglaries, stealing more than $100,000 in cash and jewelry, prompting Jose to move the family to Beverly Hills. Lyle attended Princeton University but was suspended for antisocial behavior and academic misconduct. In early August 1989, Eric disclosed to Lyle that their father was molesting him. Lyle disclosed that he had been molested when he was between 6 and 8 years old. This led to multiple confrontations within the family. Both brothers testified that their father threatened to kill them if they did not keep the abuse secret. 2 weeks later, on August 18, 1989, Lyle and Eric tried to buy handguns from several firearms dealers, but they did not want to wait for background checks. Instead, they bought shotguns, for which they did not need a license. On the evening of August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty were watching television in their home. Lyle and Eric entered with shotguns and killed their parents. Jose was shot 6 times, Kitty was shot 10 times. In the months after the killings, the brothers spent approximately $700,000 on luxury items, businesses, and travel, leading the police to suspect them of murdering their parents for the inheritance. Eric eventually confessed to his psychologist, Jerome Oziel, who then began recording his sessions with Lyle and Eric. Lyle and Eric were arrested in March 1990 and charged with their parents' murder. During the trial in 1990, the judge ruled that Oziel's recordings of therapy were admissible evidence because the brothers had made verbal threats and forfeited doctor-patient privilege. The brothers argued that they feared for their lives and killed their parents in self-defense. They gave detailed accounts of being sexually abused by their father. They described their mother as a mentally unstable alcoholic and drug addict who enabled the abuse and was also violent towards the brothers. They believed their father would have been proud of them for killing him, and that killing their mother was an act of mercy. Warning, what follows is a short excerpt of Lyle Menendez's testimony and may be disturbing to some viewers.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me. And he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it. and that I was exaggerating.
I mentioned that stigma played a role in this case. The Menendez brothers' defense that their father had an authoritarian hold on the family and that he had sexually abused them, these were seen as desperate claims and not credible. This was brutally satirized on SNL. In this clip, the brothers have testified that they have two sets of identical twins, and it was the twins who actually committed the murder.
No driver's licenses, no birth certificates, no social security cards.
My father said Danny and Jose Jr. didn't deserve to have any official records of their existence because they were weak and not good tennis players.
So in other words, it was as if your father didn't want anyone to know your other brothers even existed.
Yes.
To conclude, a cousin testified that Lyle had disclosed the abuse to her in the mid-1970s. She told Kitty about the incident, but Kitty sided with her husband and accused Lyle of lying. Their first trial in 1994 resulted in a mistrial after two separate juries deadlocked. The second trial in 1996 restricted the defense from presenting the allegations of abuse. After 5 years of trial and 3 juries, both brothers were finally convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Did they have PTSD? I went through the DSM-5-TR and just highlighted aspects of PTSD that seemed to fit one or both brothers. PTSD, exposure to sexual violence, directly experiencing the traumatic events. Something that would have particularly affected Lyle is A3, learning that the traumatic events occurred to a close family member. We don't know if they experienced distressing memories or distressing dreams or dissociative reactions. We can assume they experienced prolonged psychological distress. C1, avoidance of or efforts to avoid distressing memories, thoughts, describes their delinquent behavior prior to the murders. We don't know whether they experienced negative alterations in cognition and mood, or negative beliefs or expectations about themselves, or persistent negative emotional states. Their criminal behavior before the murder itself, and the shopping spree afterwards could be signs of E, marked alterations in arousal and reactivity, verbal or physical aggression towards people, followed by reckless or self-destructive behavior. The duration was certainly more than 1 month. Something that doesn't fit the PTSD diagnosis is the boys were active in the community. Eric competed in tennis, and they were a part of high-class boys' clubs. We don't know if their behaviors were attributable to substance use or if they experienced depersonalization or derealization. The lifetime prevalence of PTSD is that it affects 9.7% of women and 3.6% of men. It is more common when negative events result from human intent, personal attacks, for example, than from impersonal events such as natural disasters or accidents. For the Menendez brothers, we can't be sure about the etiology of PTSD. We don't know what biological predispositions they may have had. There could be unknown factors, temperamental predisposition. Were they high in neuroticism? Were they low in agreeableness and conscientiousness? Were they high in the dark triad? For their social environment, the family moved across the country from New York to LA. Lyle and Eric exhibit high-risk antisocial behavior, such as stealing. The father is demanding, critical, perfectionistic. Mother has addictions, is physically abusive, emotionally removed. Psychological enmeshment between the brothers could have been a factor. They were absent stable friends or school environment, and each becomes an extension of self to the other. Stress. Both children were sexually abused by their father, and their mother failed to protect them. Lyle learns to his horror that for his younger brother Eric, the abuse is ongoing. Where it gets interesting is that those with PTSD are 80% more likely to have at least one other mental disorder. Comorbidities and violence. The specific comorbidity that intrigues me is bipolar disorder. The second quote here reads, "People with bipolar disorder are more at risk for exhibiting violence, with rates between 9.4% and nearly 50%, often in the presence of comorbid diagnoses. Bipolar patients are prone to agitation that can result in impulsive aggression during manic and mixed episodes." So, did they have bipolar disorder? I've highlighted here some of the DSM criteria that fits: abnormally and persistently increased goal-directed activity or energy lasting at least 1 week and present most of the day, nearly every day; grandiosity; excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences; harm to self or others; or there are psychotic features. Could it be CPTSD? Even though this is not technically a DSM category, CPTSD makes sense. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder acknowledges that childhood sexual abuse involves victims of a young age, repeated trauma, and it is often trusted family members who are the perpetrators. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse may experience severe disorganizations of personality that mimic every kind of personality disorder and are therefore often misdiagnosed. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse may experience an even greater and more intense rage toward the non-offending parent because they knew of the abuse and chose either to ignore it or condone it. A cousin told Lyle's mother, Kitty, about the abuse. Kitty sided with her husband and accused Lyle of lying. Jose was shot 6 times, Kitty was shot 10 times, during which time Eric had to stop to reload. Treatments for PTSD. First-line treatments are CBT, CPT, and prolonged exposure. Second-line treatments include EMDR, narrative therapy, and medications. Obviously, stigma surrounding male victims of sexual abuse meant that neither Lyle or Eric admitted to each other that there was a problem, much less have an opportunity to reach out for treatment. Outcomes of the case. So this is an interesting bit. The American Psychological Association filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court of California in 1992 in support of the Menendez brothers, arguing that Dr. Oziel did not have sufficient grounds to break confidentiality. Patients often show aggressive behavior toward their therapist, and if this were sufficient to break confidentiality, it would have a chilling effect on future patients' willingness to seek help. This would actually reduce therapists' effectiveness and increase danger to the public. The court accepted the arguments, and 2 of the 4 sessions recorded by Dr. Oziel, including the brothers' confession, were suppressed. A second outcome of the case concerns stigma. There has been a major shift in how society perceives the male victims of childhood sexual abuse. Recent documentaries and films about the Menendez case have brought renewed scrutiny to how stigma influenced the case in the courts and the media. Conclusions: stigma prevented the brothers from getting help. When they tried to get help, they weren't believed. Stigma caused the brothers to keep the abuse secret, even from each other. When they learned of each other's secret, it triggered a series of events that led to murder and a months-long manic episode afterwards. Stigma played a role in their trial and their sentencing. Even with the negative public perception, however, it took 3 juries to finally convict them. Would any of this have happened if the Menendez brothers had no stigma, somewhere safe to go, someone to talk to, and someone to believe them? Thank you.